Emma sat on her bed in the quiet darkness of her small room. The clock on her nightstand showed 3 in the morning. Her old brown suitcase lay open beside her, filled with her favorite clothes and the art supplies that meant everything to her. In her trembling hands, she held a white envelope from the London Art College. The letter inside had changed everything. They wanted her. They believed in her talent. They were offering her a full scholarship to study art. But downstairs in the small house, her father James slept peacefully in his one armchair. He had fallen asleep there again, still wearing his factory uniform. Emma knew he had worked another double shift, just like he had done every day for the past 5 years, ever since her mother had passed away from cancer. The bills never stopped coming, and the family bookshop on Main Street was barely surviving. Most people bought their books online now, and fewer customers visited each month. Emma walked quietly to her window and looked down at the street where she had grown up. The old bookshop sat between Mrs. Patterson's flower shop and Mr. Davies' bakery. Her father had inherited the shop from his father, and his father before that. It had been in their family for 3 generations. James always talked about how someday Emma would take over the business, how proud he was that she would carry on the family tradition. She had tried so many times to tell him about her dreams of becoming an artist. Emma had shown him some of her paintings when she was younger, but he would always pat her head and say, "That's nice, dear, but art is just a hobby. The bookshop is your future." Every time she gathered courage to talk about art school, he would smile that gentle smile and change the subject to something about the shop. He would show her the old cash register or explain how to order new books from publishers. How could she break his heart by telling him she wanted something completely different? The morning train to London would leave in exactly 3 hours. Emma had saved money from her part-time job at the local cafe for months to buy the ticket. She had told everyone she was saving for new books for college, but really she was saving for escape. The art college term started next week, and this was her only chance. Emma looked round her small bedroom one more time. The walls were covered with drawings and paintings. She had hidden most of her artwork under her bed because she was afraid her father would ask too many questions. There were landscapes of the countryside round their town, portraits of people she saw at the cafe, and abstract pieces that showed her emotions when she felt trapped. She walked to her dresser and picked up the family photo that sat there. It showed her mother, and her father on her 16th birthday, just 6 months before her mother got sick. They all looked so happy in the picture. Her father's kind face smiled back at her from the frame. His eyes were the same warm brown as hers, and his hair was starting to turn grey even then. He looked tired in the photo, but proud and content. Emma's heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. She loved her father more than anything in the world. He had sacrificed so much for her after her mother died. He worked those terrible factory shifts during the day and tried to keep the bookshop open in the evenings and weekends. He never complained, never said he was tired. He did it all for her, to give her a future. But Emma knew that if she stayed, she would spend the rest of her life feeling like something important was missing. She would work in the bookshop, maybe get married to someone from town, have children, and never know if she could have been a real artist. The thought scared her more than leaving did. With shaking hands, she picked up a pen from her desk. She found a piece of paper and sat down to write. The words came slowly, each one feeling heavy and painful. "Dad, I'm sorry. I have to follow my dreams. Please forgive me. I love you more than you will ever know." Emma, she folded the note carefully and wrote Dad on the outside. Her hands were shaking so much she could barely hold the pen. Emma looked at her suitcase one more time, she had packed her best clothes, her sketchbooks, her paints and brushes. She had also packed the small teddy bear her mother had given her when she was 7. Everything else would have to stay behind. With tears streaming down her face, Emma picked up her suitcase and crept quietly downstairs. The old wooden stairs creaked softly under her feet, and she froze each time, afraid her father would wake up. But he continued sleeping peacefully in his chair, his work boots still on his feet. She tiptoed into the kitchen and placed the note on the table where her father would find it when he woke up. The kitchen smelled like the tea he had made before falling asleep. Emma wanted to kiss his forehead goodbye, but she was afraid she would lose her courage if she got too close. She opened the front door as quietly as possible and stepped out into the cold morning air. The taxi she had called was waiting at the end of the street with its engine running softly. Emma walked toward it, her suitcase feeling heavier with each step. As the taxi pulled away from her childhood home, Emma pressed her face against the window and watched her father's bedroom window grow smaller and smaller in the distance. She had chosen her dreams, but the cost felt unbearable. She was leaving behind the only person who truly loved her, and she didn't know if she would ever be able to forgive herself. 3 years had passed since that cold morning when Emma left her father's house. Now she stood in the bright white gallery in central London, wearing an expensive black dress and holding a glass of champagne. The walls round her were covered with her paintings, each one carefully lit by professional spotlights. People in fancy clothes walked round the room, studying her work and talking in quiet voices about art and color and meaning. Emma watched as a woman in a red coat pointed at one of her paintings and nodded to her husband. The painting showed a young woman sitting alone at a train station, her face turned away from the viewer. The price tag next to it said £3,000. Emma remembered painting it on a rainy Tuesday night when she felt especially lonely. Now it would hang in someone's expensive house, and she would never see it again. A man with grey hair and thick glasses approached her. He was Robert Chen, one of London's most important art critics. Emma had read his reviews in newspapers for years before she ever met him. "Miss Thompson," he said with a warm smile, "your work continues to amaze me. The emotional depth in these pieces is extraordinary. You have a gift for capturing the human condition in its most vulnerable state." Emma smiled politely and thanked him, but his words felt hollow. People always talked about the emotion in her paintings, but they didn't understand where that emotion came from. They saw art, but she saw her own pain reflected back at her from every canvas. After the gallery event ended, Emma walked slowly back to her small flat in Camden. It was a nice apartment with big windows and good light for painting, but it always felt empty. She had lived there for 2 years, but she had never invited anyone over for dinner. She had never had friends come to watch movies or drink tea. The neighbors were polite when she met them in the hallway, but she didn't know their names. Emma sat on her sofa and looked round the living room. Her paintings covered the walls, but there were no family photos, no pictures with friends, no signs that other people were part of her life. On the coffee table sat her mobile phone, the same one she had carried for 3 years. Every night she went through the same ritual. She picked up the phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the name Dad. Home. Her finger hovered over the call button, just like it had done hundreds of times before. What would she say if he answered? How could she explain 3 years of complete silence? How could she tell him that she had never called, not even on his birthday or at Christmas? Emma tried to imagine the conversation. Maybe he would be angry. Maybe he would hang up on her, or worse, maybe he would cry, and she would hear the pain in his voice that she had caused. Maybe he would ask her why she had left without saying goodbye, and she wouldn't have a good answer. She thought about writing a letter instead. But what could she write? "Dear Dad, I'm sorry I abandoned you. I'm famous now and making lots of money, so it was worth hurting you." No, that sounded terrible. Everything she thought of sounded selfish and cruel. Emma had tried to make friends in London, but every relationship felt surface level and fake. She would meet other artists at galleries or people at coffee shops near her flat, but she could never let them get close to her. How could she trust anyone else when she had hurt the most important person in her life? How could she talk about family or childhood memories when she was carrying such a heavy secret? Her art had changed over the 3 years in art school. She used to paint bright landscapes and happy portraits, but now her work was full of dark colors and sad themes. Her recent painting showed people sitting alone in empty rooms, children looking out windows with sad expressions, and figures reaching toward each other, but never quite touching. The critics loved this change. They wrote reviews about her mature, artistic vision and her powerful exploration of modern loneliness. Gallery owners competed to show her work, and collectors paid higher and higher prices for her paintings. But Emma knew the truth. She wasn't exploring loneliness as an artistic concept. She was painting her own life, her own isolation, her own guilt, sometimes late at night, when the rain tapped against her studio window. Emma would stand in front of her easel with a paintbrush in her hand and tears on her cheeks. She would paint another lonely figure, another empty room, another scene of people who couldn't connect with each other. The paintings came from somewhere deep inside her, from the part of her heart that missed her father every single day. One particularly difficult evening, Emma picked up her phone again and scrolled to her father's number. This time she actually pressed the call button, and the phone started to ring. Her heart pounded as she listened to the ringing sound. But after 3 rings, fear overwhelmed her, and she quickly hung up. She sat there shaking, wondering if he had seen the missed call, wondering if he would try to call her back. Emma set the phone down and walked back to her easel. She picked up her paintbrush and started working on a new painting. This one showed a young woman standing at a phone booth, her hand reaching toward the phone, but not quite touching it. In the background, a small house with warm lights in the windows seemed very far away. Success, Emma had learned, meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. All the money and recognition in the world couldn't fill the empty space where her father's love used to be. Emma had been feeling empty for months, even with all her success in the art world. The money and fame meant nothing when she went home to her quiet flat every night. She decided she needed to do something that would help other people. Something that might fill the hollow feeling in her chest. That's how she found herself walking into the East Side Community Center on a grey Thursday morning, carrying a box of art supplies. The community center was in a rough part of London, where many families struggled to pay their bills. The building was old and the paint on the walls was chipped, but it was clean and filled with the sounds of children playing and teenagers talking. Emma had volunteered to teach free art classes to young people who couldn't afford proper art lessons. Most of these kids have never held a real paintbrush, explained Sarah, the center director, as she showed Emma to a small room with folding tables and plastic chairs. They use whatever they can find to express themselves. You'd be amazed at what they create with just pencils and paper. Emma set up her supplies and waited for her first class. About 12 teenagers wandered in, most of them looking suspicious or bored. They sat down reluctantly, whispering to each other and checking their phones. Emma introduced herself and started showing them basic drawing techniques, but she could tell most of them weren't really interested. But then she noticed one boy sitting in the back corner. He had messy brown hair and wore a faded jacket that was too big for him. While the other students were barely paying attention, he was sketching frantically in a worn notebook. His pencil moved quickly across the paper, creating detailed drawings of the London skyline. Emma walked over quietly and looked at his work. "That's incredible," she said softly. The boy looked up at her with dark, angry eyes. "It's just buildings," he muttered, but Emma could see pride in his expression. "I'm Emma," she said, sitting down next to him. "What's your name?" "Tom," he replied, still looking suspicious. Over the next few weeks, Emma learned more about Tom's situation. He lived with his grandmother Mary in a small flat above her convenience shop. His mother had left when he was very young, and he had never known his father. Mary worked long hours in the shop and expected Tom to help her after school and on weekends. But Tom had other dreams. During art class, he would talk about music while he drew. He played guitar and wrote songs, and he dreamed of performing in the big music venues in Manchester. Emma could see the talent in his drawings and hear the passion in his voice when he talked about music. "My Nan doesn't understand," Tom said one afternoon, aggressively sketching a cityscape with dark, heavy lines. "She thinks music is just noise. She wants me to work in her shop forever, selling milk and newspapers to the same boring people every day." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Tom's words sounded exactly like things she had thought about her father and the bookshop. "Have you tried talking to your grandmother about your dreams?" Emma asked carefully. "Really talking? I mean, explaining how important music is to you?" Tom snorted and shook his head. "She wouldn't understand. Old people never do. They just want you to be safe and boring like them. Sometimes you just have to take what you want." "And what about her feelings?" Emma asked quietly, her heart starting to race. "What about leaving her alone?" "She'll get over it," Tom said. But his voice wavered slightly. "I can't spend my whole life making other people happy. I'm gonna leave next week. Go to Manchester where the real music is. There's a guy there who said he'd let me sleep on his couch while I tried to get gigs." Emma stared at Tom's drawing. It showed a lone figure walking away from a small building, heading toward tall city buildings in the distance. The figure looked small and alone, but determined. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, seeing Tom's angry, determined face over and over again. She saw herself at 16, frustrated and desperate to escape. She remembered her father's gentle smile when he talked about the bookshop, the pride in his voice when he imagined her carrying on the family business. Emma realized that Tom was about to make the same mistake she had made. He was so focused on what he wanted that he couldn't see the pain he would cause, just like her. He was choosing to run away instead of having a difficult conversation with someone who loved him, though. Next week, Tom didn't show up for art class. Emma asked the other students where he was, and they told her he had left for Manchester. He had packed his clothes and his guitar in the middle of the night and caught the early morning train. Emma's hands shook as she called the number Tom had given her for emergencies. His grandmother Mary answered on the third ring. "Hello." Mary's voice sounded tired and sad. Double quotes Mrs. Wilson. "This is Emma, Tom's art teacher. I heard about what happened, and I wanted to offer my support." Mary started crying on the phone. "He left me a note," she sobbed. "Just a note on the kitchen table, saying he was sorry, but he had to follow his dreams, just like his mother did 20 years ago. She left the same way, with just a note. History repeating itself." Emma's heart broke as she listened to Mary cry. She realized that running away didn't just hurt the people you left behind. It created cycles of pain that touched whole families, whole generations. Tom's mother had run away, leaving him with Mary. Now Tom was running away, leaving Mary alone again. Emma had thought leaving only hurt her father, but she was wrong. It was part of a bigger pattern of people choosing their dreams over their families, of people being too afraid to have honest conversations about what they wanted. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Emma was sitting in her London studio, mixing colours on her palette. She had been working on a new painting of a train station, trying to capture the loneliness she felt every day, when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer it because she didn't recognize the number. "Is this Emma Thompson?" asked a calm, professional voice. "Yes, this is Emma," she replied, setting down her paintbrush. "This is Dr. Wilson from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling about your father, James Thompson. He's had a heart attack." Emma's world stopped. The paintbrush fell from her hand and clattered to the floor, leaving a streak of blue paint across her jeans. Her hands started shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Is he alive?" she whispered. "Yes, he's stable now," Dr. Wilson said gently. "The surgery went well. But he's been asking for you. He keeps saying your name." Emma hung up the phone and ran round her flat like a crazy person, throwing clothes into a bag. She called a taxi to take her to the train station, her heart pounding the entire way on the train platform. She bought a ticket for the next train to her hometown, not caring how much it cost. During the 3-hour journey, Emma stared out the window at the countryside rolling past. Her mind raced with terrible thoughts. What if her father died before she got there? What if the last memory he had of her was that note she had left on the kitchen table 3 years ago? What if he was angry with her for abandoning him when he needed her most? She remembered all the times she had almost called him over the past 3 years, all those nights when she picked up her phone and then put it down again. All those birthdays and holidays when she had written his phone number on a piece of paper but never dialed it. Now it might be too late to tell him how sorry she was. The train seemed to move so slowly. Emma watched other passengers reading books or sleeping or talking on their phones. And she wanted to scream at them. Didn't they understand that her father was lying in a hospital bed, maybe dying? Didn't they know that she might never get the chance to apologize for the worst mistake of her life? When the train finally reached her hometown station, Emma ran off before it had completely stopped. She grabbed a taxi and gave the driver the hospital address, offering him extra money to drive fast. As they drove through the familiar streets, Emma saw that not much had changed. The same shops were still there, the same houses with their small gardens. But everything looked smaller than she remembered Dot at the hospital. Emma ran through the corridors until she found the cardiac ward. A nurse with kind eyes directed her to room 137. Emma stood outside the door for a moment, afraid to go in. What would she say? How could she explain 3 years of silence? She pushed open the door slowly and saw her father lying in the hospital bed. He looked so much smaller than she remembered. His face pale against the white pillows. There were tubes and wires connected to machines that beeped softly. His hair had turned completely grey, and there were new wrinkles round his eyes. But when he saw her, his face lit up like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Emma, my dear girl," he whispered. Reaching out his hand toward her, Dot, Emma rushed to his bedside and took his hand in both of hers. It felt thin and cold, but his grip was still strong. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at him. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she cried. "I should have called. I should have written letters. I should have explained why I left. I've been such a terrible daughter." "Shh," James said softly, squeezing her hand. "I know why you left. Love. I always knew." Emma looked at him with confusion. How could he know? She had never told him about her dreams of being an artist. She had never explained about the art, college, or her need to escape the small town. Her father smiled weakly and pointed to the bedside table. "Look in that drawer," he said. Emma opened the drawer and gasped. Inside were dozens of newspaper clippings about her art shows, reviews of her paintings, and photographs of her standing next to her artwork in galleries. Some of the clippings were yellow with age. "Carefully cut out and saved." Double quotes, "Mrs. Patterson from the post office has been collecting these for me," James explained. "She cuts them out special and brings them to the shop. I have a whole scrapbook at home full of articles about your success." Emma's eyes widened in shock. You knew about my art career. After you left, I found your old sketches hidden under your bed," James said. "Such beautiful work, Emma. I don't know why you felt you had to hide them from me. I looked at every single drawing, and I was so proud." "But you always talked about the bookshop," Emma said, confused. "You wanted me to carry on the family business." James's eyes filled with tears. "I was just scared of losing you," he admitted. "After your mother died, you were all I had left in the world. I thought if I could make you feel needed at the shop, you would stay with me forever. But I was wrong to make you feel trapped. A father should help his daughter fly, not clip her wings." Emma cried harder, holding her father's hand tightly. All these years, she had thought he didn't understand her dreams, but he had known all along. And he had been proud of her success even when she wasn't there to share it with him. "I've missed you every single day," she whispered. "I've missed you too, my darling girl," James replied. "But look at what you've accomplished. Look at how far you've flown." Emma had planned to stay in her hometown just long enough for her father to get better. She thought she would spend a few weeks helping him recover from his heart attack, and then return to her successful life in London. But as days turned into weeks, something unexpected began to happen. While her father rested, Emma decided to clean up the old bookshop that had been closed since his hospitalization. The front of the shop looked exactly as she remembered from her childhood, with tall wooden shelves full of books and the same old cash register her grandfather had used. But when she opened the door to the back room, Emma stopped in complete shock. The storage room she remembered from her youth had been completely transformed. The walls were painted bright white, and professional lighting had been installed on the ceiling. Easels stood around the room displaying paintings, photographs, and sculptures created by local artists. Price tags hung next to each piece, and there was a small desk in the corner with a guest book full of signatures and comments from visitors. Emma walked slowly around the room, studying each piece of art. There were watercolor paintings of the countryside around their town, photographs of local families and children, and clay sculptures made by teenagers from the high school. In one corner, she found a small plaque that read, "The James Thompson Community Gallery, supporting local artists since 2022, when her father felt strong enough to visit the shop." Emma asked him about the gallery. James smiled as he looked round the bright room. "You inspired this," he told her, his voice stronger than it had been in the hospital, "after you left. I spent a lot of time thinking about what you had said in your note about following your dreams. I realized how many young people in this town had creative talents they were afraid to share." Emma felt a warm spread through her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. "But I thought you didn't understand about art," she said softly. "I was scared," James admitted. "I was afraid that if I encouraged creativity, more young people would leave our town like you did. But then I realized that maybe if we supported their dreams here, they wouldn't feel like they had to run away." Over the next few weeks, Emma began spending more time in the bookshop. She started teaching informal art classes in the back room gallery. showing local children and teenagers the painting techniques she had learned in London. Soon, the quiet bookshop was filled with laughter and conversation as young artists worked on their projects. Emma discovered that teaching brought her more joy than she had felt in years in London. Her art had become dark and lonely, but here, surrounded by eager students and her father's support, she began painting with bright colors again. The paintings she created showed families together, children playing in gardens, and people talking and laughing with each other. One afternoon, Emma was teaching a group of teenagers how to mix colors when she heard a familiar voice at the front door of the shop. She looked up and saw Tom standing there, looking thinner than she remembered and carrying a worn guitar case. "Emma," Tom said hesitantly, "I heard you were back in town." Emma set down her paintbrush and walked to the front of the shop. Tom looked older than his 16 years, and his clothes were wrinkled as if he had been sleeping in them. "Tom, what are you doing here? I thought you went to Manchester." Tom's face reddened with embarrassment. "I did, but it didn't work out like I thought it would." He looked down at his feet. "I made a mistake. Running away didn't solve anything. It just made everything worse." Emma felt a heartache for the young man. She remembered her own experience of leaving home and how lonely she had felt, even when she was successful. "Where are you staying now?" Emma asked gently. "I came back yesterday. I'm hoping my Nan will let me come home, but I haven't had the courage to go see her yet." Emma thought about Mary, Tom's grandmother, and how heartbroken she had sounded on the phone when Tom first left. "Why don't we go see her together?" Emma suggested. "Sometimes it's easier to have difficult conversations when someone else is there to help." They walked to Mary's convenience shop, which was only 2 streets away from the bookshop. Mary was behind the counter, looking tired and sad, when she saw Tom. Her eyes filled with tears. "Tom," she whispered, "you came back." "I'm sorry, Nan," Tom said, his voice breaking. "I was wrong to leave like that." Emma helped Tom and Mary have the conversation they should have had months ago. Mary explained how scared and lonely she had felt when Tom disappeared. Just like when his mother had left years before. Tom talked about his dreams of making music, but also about how homesick and lost he had felt in Manchester. "Dreams are important," Emma told them both as they sat in the small room above the shop. "But so is family. The best dreams are the ones we can share with people we love." Mary listened carefully as Tom played some of the songs he had written. She didn't understand all the music, but she could hear the talent in his voice and the passion in his playing. "Maybe we can find a way for you to pursue music without leaving home," Mary said thoughtfully. "Perhaps you could perform at local venues or teach guitar lessons to younger children." As Emma watched Tom and Mary rebuild their relationship, she realized something important about her own life. She didn't have to choose between her art career and her father. She could paint anywhere, but home was where her heart could finally heal. Emma decided to open a small art studio in the flat above the bookshop. She continued to sell her paintings to galleries in London, but now she also taught classes and supported other local artists. Her new paintings were full of light, connection, and hope, completely different from the dark, lonely work she had created during her years of isolation. Every evening, Emma and her father would sit together in the bookshop, sharing stories and dreams they had been too afraid to voice before. James told her about his own childhood dreams of becoming a writer, and Emma shared her fears and hopes about the future. The day she left without saying goodbye had taught Emma about having courage to pursue her dreams. But coming home had taught her something even more valuable. Love grows stronger when people have the courage to stay and fight for understanding, rather than running away from difficult conversations. Emma learned that home wasn't a prison that kept her from her dreams. Home was the foundation that made her dreams more meaningful, because now she had people she loved to share them with. The end.